From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We are joined, as always, with our super producer, Andrew Triforce Howard. Most importantly, you are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. This is one of the best times of the week for us. It's our favorite evening where we get to hear from the best part of the show, you, specifically you, fellow conspiracy realists. Now we're going to look at 3 Mile Island. We're going to talk about gardening and Adderall and how the dead live on within us. But before we do that, a lot of folks have been asking us, you guys, about recent calamities.
Yeah, we've experienced several personally. And I don't know, have you guys noticed there are people out here maybe listening to this episode who are actually concerned with our safety, and that feels really nice.
Yeah, it's definitely nice to be checked in on. Heard from a couple of folks on Instagram, been getting emails about it. It's all 3 of us, and we hear you and we appreciate your concern. And it was well-placed concern, as it turns out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so we're going to pause for a second, and we'll come back and update everybody on the recent calamities as we dive in. All right, folks, we're back. As you may have heard, Hurricane Helene walloped the absolute bulldog nuts out of the southeastern United States.
Yeah, knocks the boiled peanuts right out of our hands.
Right. And a lot of people in the affected areas are way worse off than us. Entire communities in the Carolinas have disappeared, and our own Noel Brown has experienced disaster as well.
Yeah, I mean, again, shout out, and our hearts go out to folks from the Asheville area, the places, I believe the town of Chimney Rock, a lovely little tourist destination near Asheville, more or less wiped off the map. And many folks in Asheville are still underwater, without power, without potable water. People are using like water out of pools to flush their toilets and stuff. When you see the reporting on this kind of thing coming your way, you try to think positively, you do what you can, but that at the end of the day, it's like an act of God. And we were very lucky here in Atlanta. I don't know about you guys, but I just got some minor basement water intrusion. I mean, it was just, we were pummeled with rain to the point where any roof is going to be overwhelmed and leak. And I gratefully had my gutters cleaned pretty recently. So here at my house in Atlanta, it wasn't so bad. But the Augusta, Georgia area where I grew up, and where I also own a house that I inherited from my mom when she passed away a couple of years ago, absolutely obliterated by multiple trees. I had been renting this home to a dear family friend. My mom was a singer, an opera singer, and taught voice lessons kind of in the last years of her life. And a person who is, for all intents and purposes, like a sister to me. This is one of my mom's best and favorite voice students, a real close, basically family member. She escaped with her life and the life of her 2 cats, thankfully. Had to climb out a window, even told me she, in a weird way, feels like my mom woke her up 20 minutes before the trees impacted the house at around 5:30 a.m. over the weekend. And yeah, there's multiple trees inside of the house. And part of the benefit of renting to this friend, she loved my mom, and my mom had a lot of weird stuff, opera memorabilia and the like, and grand piano and all that. And so a lot of that stuff was able to stay in the house. It's now open to the elements. I've, applied for disaster relief and cleanup through crisiscleanup.org. And there's just so many trees down in the Augusta area. I'm not sure when they're going to get to my house. So
yeah, got some family in Appalachia still without running water or power. Luckily, they have prepared in advance. The bridges are out there was a lot of flooding. Matt, how are things going in your neck of the global woods?
Feeling relatively untouched up here. Most of my neighbors and I didn't sleep. All of my friends I was in contact with, none of us slept because it looked like it was going to be horrific. And it turns out it was, just not for us in particular. This storm killed well over 100 people. I think 119 was the last estimate I saw from CNN.
Most recent one, yeah.
Likely to rise.
Yeah.
Yeah, think of the people who are disappeared currently.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Or, fallout from lack of resources, lack of hospital, lack of being able to be reached, lack of medication for elderly folks. I mean, this number is going to rise.
The effects of the storm are going to continue on for weeks, if not months from now. And it's just horrifying. Yeah, it's really horrifying.
Mm-hmm. And then to add to that, there was a massive leak of chlorine gas as we record here in the fine metropolis of Atlanta, Georgia. Over in Conyers, just a little bit east as the crow flies, a place called BioLab, which is notoriously slapdash in their infrastructure as a result of flooding, to the point about knock-on effects. Their compound was compromised, and there is currently a huge flume of chlorine gas moving through the city.
And, Ben, when we all initially saw this story, I think we attributed it to some kind of negligence, which is definitely not off the table. But this was also in some ways flooding related, right? Like it was like a building that had massive standing water on the roof, and it fell through and reacted with the chlorine, which is, if anyone knows, when you right? Chlorine and water? Or no, I mean, is that all it takes for it to create chlorine gas? It needs something else, right?
Chlorine gas is incredibly dangerous in an enclosed environment. It does dissipate fairly readily in an open air environment. However, as we were talking about earlier in our group chat, the effects appear to be pretty widespread in the metro area. Noel, you were saying earlier, you walked outside, you saw the haze, your nose started burning.
Yeah, I mean, here it's 30 miles away, like you said, to the east. But as we know, with things like Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island, which we're going to get to, that fallout, it travels with the winds. And I think we all walked outside to a weird mist-like haze. And Matt, you're up a little closer to, well, I guess you used to be, and maybe you're in a different direction now, but an area called Buford Highway or Lawrenceville. I saw videos from there where it was just literally like the mist, like the Stephen King story, just absolutely this very weird, sickly kind of haze. I don't know. Did you experience that? I think maybe a little more densely than we did here in Atlanta.
Yeah, I'm significantly northeast of you guys in the city, and I'm, that's where the wind was blowing. So my son's school sent out a big notice that they were keeping all the kids inside, and they were canceling, a bunch of activities outside and everything like that. And if you look out, you get that haze and you take a whiff. It didn't hurt my lungs or anything like that, but your body knows you shouldn't be breathing whatever this is.
Spidey sense.
And again, we are saying this to keep everyone informed, and we are immensely grateful for everybody who checked in. Our primary point here is that there are other people who are much more adversely affected. So please do check in on your friends and relatives in the area. Please do also consider, if you have the means and inclination, helping out if you can. And every little bit matters. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be a social media post. It doesn't have to be a GoFundMe. When people need help, they're often frightened to ask for it. And it is a tremendous good to contribute to some organization.
And I'm really lucky that I have, really dear friends near my mom's house that are checking in on it for me, but they literally can't get to it yet. And it's not safe to go in the house. Power is out in Augusta, and they can't drink. The water is not flowing because of damage to the pumps. But back to the chlorine thing, I just wanted to mention too, we all three got, I think, the same public safety alert that reads, interestingly, Georgia Emergency Management Agency, Homeland Security Agency, on behalf of the Environmental Protection Division, local area emergency due to Rockdale County biolab fire. The EPA is monitoring air quality for chlorine and related compounds. Chemical levels are unlikely to cause harm to most people.
Right.
So
and
take that for what it's worth.
Make sure to check that out, folks, so you can study the gratuitous use of capital letters in that text message.
Sorry. It's a lot.
Most people is in capital letters. Just to say again, the focus is on the other people who have been more adversely affected. We are here. We appreciate you. Please, please, please help our community. Don't worry about us.
Yeah. Oh, and keep your ear to the ground, because in both of these instances, if you look at BioLab, the company that's responsible for the fire here in Rockdale County / Conyers / east of Atlanta, you can look back at the history of this company and see that there have been very similar spills / fires / basically toxic chemicals that have been released in mass from this group and from this facility many times. Exactly 20 years ago, there was a very similar fire that's been written about in a lot of places, at least Atlanta publications and several other that are not so local. This is a quote from Rockdale County Fire Chief Marion McDonald. This person said, "I've been with the county for 7 years, and this is probably the third event of this magnitude that person is aware of." And the other thing to keep in mind, there are currently 3 tropical storm cyclones that are forming in the Atlantic right now, with around a 40% chance, at least estimated right now, to the best of what I've been seeing, of forming another storm, if not more than one storm that rolls back through that same area of the Gulf of Mexico.
As we record on the evening of September 30th, 2024. So again, we want to check in. I love that you say, keep your ear to the ground. Help us be informed as well, folks, because a lot of things are not quite making the news. And, it's a sticky subject, right? The idea of when it rains, it pours does apply here. We are safe. We hope you are safe as well. We wanted to spend this time with you at the very top, and thank you for your time checking in with us. Do you guys, before we go to an ad break, I know we're running long. Do you want to hear a weird message about dead people?
Oh, yeah.
God, yes.
This is why we hang out. All right. So our returning guest, A-Frame, is weighing in.
Hey, dudes, it's A-Frame, and I was listening to older Strange News episode, and you mentioned as a way to make people uncomfortable, the thought of them having someone else's teeth within their mouth. So because you did that to me, I'm reminding you that you should think about having someone else's teeth in place of your teeth. Great to think about. But on a different note, I had a knee surgery in 2019. It's starting to hurt again, and in a few years I'll probably need a knee replacement. But anyways, when that happened, they added a cadaver ligament that runs from my kneecap to my femur, and normally there's not an extra ligament there, and it was taken from either an MCL, ACL, or LCL, other like similar knee ligament from a cadaver, and he even got a little card being like, "You're the benefactor of organ donation. Maybe think about saying yes at the DMV," which I always have, but food for thought that it is genuinely helpful to be an organ donor. It's not all livers and kidneys and stuff. It's also things like ligaments for people who wouldn't really be able to walk without it. And it's one of those things that has helped me avoid having a similar knee injury ever in that time. I do have some pain from other parts of the surgery, but the dead guy part's doing fine. And a lot of times when I say I have a dead guy's ligament in my knee, it makes some people uncomfortable, and other people are like, hell yeah. It's like either one of the two. Either like, oh, or like, oh yeah, rat, dead guy in you. Like, like that.
A-Frame et al. I guess we should say, because you have a dead man inside you, A-Frame and Company. Thank you so much. That is an important point, and it reminds me, guys, of our earlier conversations about organ donation. Remember, we were talking about how strange it is that most people in a country will be organ donors if they have to opt out of organ donation. But most people in a country, or a great percentage of the population, will not be organ donors if they have to opt in.
Yeah. Look, if you're hearing this in the future and you've got my ligaments in you, you're welcome.
Yeah. Yeah.
This
welcome.
is your ligament talking.
Mm-hmm.
You're welcome.
And sorry for the shitty kidney.
I don't know, man. I always think about like a lot of Japanese horror around possessed people possessed by organ transplants.
Oh yeah, it's a big thing. Religion is a huge factor in a lot of organ donation.
How about this? If any of us end up in somebody else, let's see if we can come up with some kind of message that we get the person's body that we're inside now to like communicate to the other two.
Yeah, the word is jejun. At least that's what I got the last two times.
Okay.
Jejune.
All right, got it.
This is a great idea, Matt. I really love that you're pointing this out, because there is a non-zero chance that if you are alive now, when you pass away, you may be, or parts of you may be in a real shipathesis situation. And the question is, are you married to this idea of your body? Do you want to help other people? Is there an article, like a body is a set of clothing, right? So is there an article of your clothing that you would not want to part with? You guys remember when I tried to donate an eye or a cornea as a living non-accident victim, and they wouldn't let me?
Yeah. No.
You're weird, Ben, and I love it.
It's bold of you.
I appreciate it's not a great eye. I'm not giving him the good one.
You never give him that good one.
I'm giving him like the 1984 Toyota Corolla version of a cornea. You know what I mean? Like, it works.
I was going to say, does it drive? Let's go.
That's all that matters.
Speaking of going, folks, please write in to us with your stories, your opinions on organ donation. We know it is a very sticky subject. It also makes a great deal of difference to a lot of people. And without sounding too Nosferatu, right now, as we record, going back to recent calamities, the humans need blood. There is a definite need for plasma across the southeastern United States in wake of the current disasters. So we're going to pause for a word from our sponsors, and we'll be back with more messages from you.
And we're back with a pretty sobering and heavy message from a listener. I'm going to leave their name out of it. They didn't say one way or the other, but it is a very personal story that they gave us permission to share. But, you know, with things like the opioid epidemic and just so much rampant addiction in this country, and now, of course, deaths resulting from adulterated drugs and pills that are pressed to look like certain prescription opioids that are laced with fentanyl and all of that. I mean, addiction is just a real problem in this country. And I don't think that's a hot take, but I wanted to read this because it is the perspective of someone who's really been through it and someone who has a sense from their own life as to maybe where the origins of their brain's craving for something else, something extra came from. I don't know. Let's just get into it. My name is X. I'm 30 years old and now live in a very small Colorado town called, let's redact it. We're in the late 18. Well, I'm not going to redact it because this is interesting. Called Lake City. Is that Lake City Quiet Pills, guys? Lake City, Colorado? Where was Lake City in that story. Was that Colorado?
No comment.
Fair enough. Well, anyway, there's another association with Lake City in Colorado, where in the late 1800s, a man named Alfred Packett allegedly ate some people. I want to look into that further, but that's a discussion for another day. I have been severely addicted to opiates and other drugs for my entire adult life. Very early in my addiction, I contracted hepatitis C, and I'm now dying of liver cancer as a result. I have been to prison for the possession of heroin. I left there with PTSD and an addiction to a drug they put me on called gabapentin, which is in the class of drug called gabapentinoids, of which Lyrica is one.
That is the drug that is often given to cats to calm them down.
That's right. Yeah, it is supposedly it's a non-opioid drug with opioid-like properties, is my understanding. Lyrica is one that you may have heard of. Continuing, I was forced by my public school as a small child to take dextroamphetamine salt, Adderall, or I would not be allowed to return to school. I have been told by addiction specialists that the effect of amphetamines on my developing mind is the reason I have such an addictive personality. The point of this email is I do not have much time left in this world. And it is my dream to share my story in the hopes that I could help someone. I have been to 6 very different types of drug rehabilitation facilities, and for whatever reason, was never able to gain anything from these places, but I have met many addicts of all different types. I have watched friends overdose and die, and I have found friends dead after days. I was in a very cultish Christian rehab called Victory Outreach, where I saw people try to pray away a friend's seizures brought on by alcohol withdrawal. That friend had a seizure, fell, and broke his neck on a toilet and died later the very same day. I'm not sure how my story fits into your podcast, but I very much would like to share my story in some way and was hoping that in some way y'all could possibly help. Thank you guys very much for what you do. I don't know, this hits me really hard directly. I grew up in a town in the midst of the opioid epidemic where there was a lot of OxyContin and those kinds of things just rolling around on the streets, and people were selling their prescriptions. It was just an absolute epidemic in my hometown. It was very, very, very serious. And I also had a lot of friends who succumbed to addiction and ultimately died from various things. You know, as we've talked about, a lot of people would get addicted to OxyContin and things like that. And then when it became less available because of changes in regulation, they just pivoted directly to heroin. It's a very common story, and it's heartbreaking. I don't know, guys. Back to the crux of this email, which is the notion that prescribing young people such a powerful drug as it's called amphetamine salts, guys. It says it on the bottle. How can it not have a significant impact on the developing brain of a young child and lead to a situation where that brain is just used to being overclocked, for lack of a better term, in some way?
Well, yeah, it's a tough thing because it's prescribed to those kids because their bodies react differently to those drugs, those stimulant drugs, than other people's bodies, right? There's a calming effect rather than an upper effect.
That is what they say. Yes.
Well, I mean, that is...
I know.
Theoretically, why, right?
Yes. But you cannot deny, though, that whatever the effect is, it's the same drug, and your brain gets used to it, and it's not something that you usually take for your whole life. And I just have to wonder when a young person decides they're not going to take that anymore or taper off of it, if that leaves sort of like a want in their brain for other stuff that they then seek out.
Agreed. The idea that we're talking about here, heavy substances applied to developing brains, is mission critical because hello, fellow humans, the development of a brain in the human body does, you could call it rehearsal. It rehearses. There's a reason that your brain grows at a slower rate than your body. The neurons in your brain can form pathways, just as you're outlining there, guys. And when you hit a human brain, with these very heavy things. Like some of us are old enough to recall when heavy psychoactives were applied to human brains in developmental stages, right? Like there's a good question over when a human brain is done developing. And to your point, Noel, and with great affection, Anonymous, it does seem that there are lasting consequences. You can inculcate addiction. You can inculcate pattern and behavior, right? With the dosing of heavy narcotics or heavy drugs in a developing human brain. And it's something that a lot of people like to pretend is not true. But shout out to the kids who got dosed with Zoloft in middle school. You know what I mean? That has a lasting effect.
No, it makes perfect sense. I mean, it's kind of intuitive to think that how could such a powerful drug not have an impact,
Mm-hmm.
And we know from things like the opioid epidemic brought on by the Sacklers, the notion that these companies will say things like this is not addictive or it's totally fine. It's like we've learned through patterns of this kind of stuff that's not always to be taken at face value. Not to be all like, don't trust big pharma. Maybe no. Maybe to be don't trust big pharma, guys, because a lot of these studies are very self-serving. The data can be manipulated in numerous ways.
Yeah, absolutely. There are very real and also fictional scenarios that end up in TV shows and movies where it's concepts of how is a company that's publicly traded, let's say, massive organization, how are they able to get narcotics in, right? Like the poppies that create heroin to then create a drug that they can sell above board to patients rather than, to a user.
And to children in this case. They're selling it to their parents, but let's be honest. I mean, there was an absolute just rash of like willy-nilly prescriptions of Adderall and Ritalin to children in those days.
Mm-hmm.
It was everywhere. It was just like, it was the thing you did, To
the question about opiates, you could also ask the same thing about cocaine or cocaine.
Yeah.
Like the remember the time we almost got kicked out of podcast movement or something because I was yelling, name me one coca field, right? In the United States, we know that there is a supply chain. Look at the way it works. What you're outlining there, Matt, reminds me quite a bit, to a disturbing degree, of the old Catch-22 with resurrection men in the United Kingdom back in the day, right? It's illegal to get the body, but it is legal to use a body if you happen upon it. So it is illegal to propagate opium and other dangerous substances unless you get the right loopholes in place. And this does arguably, and I think science will support this does arguably endanger people, especially when we're considering, like, talking earlier about the idea of opioids going through parts of the U.S. like a natural disaster.
Yeah.
It absolutely waxed a huge portion of the Midwest and the Appalachians.
Oh, God, yes.
And amphetamines did the same.
Right. Hillbilly heroin, amphetamines. The reason you can't buy certain trucker speed or certain cold relief things in bulk, there is a problem that could be addressed. And for some reason, who are we to say what that reason may be? For some reason, the people who could prevent this have chosen not to do so.
Not only chosen not to do so, chosen to capitalize on it. To Matt's point, I mean, it does feel like, and we've talked about this in big pharma episodes, and it's not even a particularly hot take, but it does feel like a legalized drug cartel distribution network.
You can't be a pusher if you don't have users, and you got to foster those users and make sure they're hooked and need more of your product. And that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what that product is. Got to have people hooked. And to that note, and if you're uncomfortable with this, Noel, just tell me. I am genuinely asking. I want to know, how did you get out of that world, that situation you were in, where you had friends that were going through stuff that our anonymous writer was writing to us about? What was there something, I don't know, how did you escape that? Because I didn't go through that when I was younger.
I'd say, I mean, it's a good question. And I mean, I'll be completely honest. I mean, I was swept up in that to a degree. I mean, I'm just going to be real. And I did escape it through a lot of things. I mean, ultimately I got out of that town.
Mm-hmm.
My life changed in many ways and I changed along with it. And, but a lot of people just get stuck in these small towns, and that's like all there is to do. And it's just an easy escape from malaise of life and just from like the boredom of living in a small town. And that's why the towns you're talking about, Ben, in the Midwest were so horribly affected, because it's just, I don't know, I don't want to sound reductive, but there's just not much going on. And
well, that's the old trope, right? Or the old truism that many of us have heard. Stuck in a small town, you have church, you have family, or you have vices, right? And those can be self-limiting factors.
And the saddest thing too is, guys, a lot of these people that I know from those days, they didn't die then. They died many years later because of continued involvement with that kind of stuff, because of the evolution of addiction. You know, Oxycontin went away, so a lot of these people replaced that with another vice. A lot of these people would do anything they could to get their hands on, you know, other prescription pharmaceuticals. Or like I said, many people pivot to heroin. So an epidemic like this, like the death toll isn't immediately visible, because this stuff follows people around. Our listener here is talking about being on their deathbed many, many years later after being incarcerated, you know, after being to multiple types of rehab facilities. This is a person coming to us at the end of their life, and they're not going to die from an overdose. They're likely going to pass away due to a resulting factor of, I presume, intravenous drug use. And this is many, many years removed, of course, many decades removed from the Adderall, you know, but like many, many years removed from the initial like addiction to the opioids, you know? So it's a lot of the people that I know, some people that I know just died a handful of years ago. And I found out about it, that they overdosed, or that they just were so malnourished and living horrible lives in terms of taking care of themselves. It's real, y'all. It's real.
It is. It is real. There are, you could say, conspiracies afoot. Beyond that, we do know that right now there are people whose lives can be saved.
You know, it's interesting. I heard recently on the radio that there's a bill at play, or there's something to do with public health, where they are now, I don't know if it's passed or whatever it is, but I think it's a good suggestion. The idea that if opioids are ever prescribed, then they also prescribe Narcan, like at the same time, so that you have that around, because a lot of this stuff is from kids taking their parents' medication and using it recreationally. So to like be in that situation and then not have that life-saving drug around, that's where the death comes from. I mean, again, I don't know the statistics of what effect that might have, but it does seem like a pretty good idea to me. So anyway, thank you. And we do hope you're still with us. I know this was a bit of a downer one, but I think it's an important thing to talk about. And thank you guys for your perspectives on this as well. Let's take a quick break and hear a word from our sponsor, and then we'll come back with one more piece of listener mail.
And we've returned, and we are going to jump to the phone lines and hear a message from Silver.
Hey guys, Silver. You can use this message in my name if you would like to. Just got out of a 40-hour Haswapper test. While I was in there, I saw an article about the restart of 3 Mile Island, that giant nuclear plant that blew up and caused some issues in Pennsylvania so many years ago. But I saw that they're going to restart one of the reactors, which is like 3,300 megawatts. And the sole purpose is the Constellation Energy is making a deal so that Microsoft can buy all the energy that nuclear power plant produces to power their AI servers. Just an interesting article. I thought it might be something you guys might want to look into. If they were to reactivate this facility, it would be the first one ever that the Nuclear Regulatory Committee approved for coming out of mothball status. It's like a $1.6 billion project that Microsoft, and I think Amazon's in on it too. So they're looking to produce power again in like 2028, I think, which is not that far away to get. Obviously, they're not going to do the one that blew up, but the other reactor's still good next to it. That would be pretty interesting, and it's all just for powering the AI servers and things like that. All right. Love the show. Always listen to you guys, so I'm going.
God, it's
Tight.
That is fascinating.
Right?
We've been talking about the big drain on the grid from all this stuff. So there's part of me that's like, this isn't an awful idea. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Thank you, Silver.
Exactly. Silver, you're awesome. Thank you so much for sending this our way.
This is so fascinating on so many levels.
To be honest, guys, I saw a little blip about this pass through, and I wanted to talk about it for Strange News, but I was like, I don't know. There's other stuff we got to talk about first. And Silver, you came in with the win. So we can
Hi-yo, Silver.
Okay. So first thing we have to get through here is that Unit 2, bad. Unit 1, good.
Right.
Okay.
Double plus. Yeah.
So Unit 2 is the reactor there at the 3 Mile Island facility in Middleton, maybe, Pennsylvania. That occurred on March 28th, 1979. That's when it was a partial meltdown, and it was very, very serious. It's the most serious accident in U.S. commercial nuclear power plant operating history.
Hey, partial, though.
Only a little.
Chin up, guys.
Guys, just a little meltdown.
Just a little meltdown. We've all
It
been
wasn't,
there.
I mean, let's just credit where credit is due. Maybe is the wrong expression, but it wasn't like Chernobyl level. It was not like an absolute fallout, apocalyptic, drifting nuclear material situation. They contained it relatively well.
Sure.
Sure. Yeah, but Unit 2, bad. That's the takeaway.
Unit 2 bad. Unit 2 bad.
Unit 1, it's still perfectly good. It's still good.
Double plus.
Okay. So
But what? Yeah. When I saw this headline, Matt, I thought they were just like using the facility, like repurposing it to make chips. I did not at all realize they were talking about relaunching a reactor. And like, this is also unprecedented because have you ever heard of a private company having their own nuclear reactor?
I mean, who do you think builds them?
Well, sure, Westinghouse,
Right.
but I'm talking about like these are usually giant energy companies. I don't know of any like manufacturing facility that has an on-site nuke reactor.
Yes, we're on the forefront of history.
It's happening now, and it's a bunch of companies that have massive data centers that are going to run their AI applications, whatever those are going to be. It is happening across the board right now, guys. We'll talk about a second one, but let's stay on just the news tip that Silver gave us there after the test.
Just a tip.
Just
Tip
the
of the cooling tower.
Okay, so we're jumping to a CNBC article from September 20th titled Constellation Energy to Restart 3 Mile Island Nuclear Plant, Sell the Power to Microsoft for AI. Now, it expects, according to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and several other journalists that have gotten access to what's going on over there, it is a deal between Constellation Energy and Microsoft primarily. And the company, Constellation Energy, expects Unit 1 reactor to be ready by 2028, just like Silver said, subject to approval, of course, by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission.
Sure. And Constellation Energy owns 3 Mile.
Yes, correct. And they had to shutter it in 2019 because it couldn't keep up with cheap natural gas and all the energy that was being produced around the United States. And they were like, gosh, we can't make energy at that price point, so I guess we got to shut this thing down. And Microsoft said, hold on one second.
Microsoft said, hold my beer.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
And by the way, If it does get approved by the NRC and begins operations in 2028, they plan to have a contract to run it until 2054, I think.
You have to bake that kind of stuff in for the deal to work.
And
it's like long-term leases on commercial property, I mean,
yes.
It's like a bit, yeah.
Yes, and again, we're talking. This happened mid-September this month. We were at the end of the month as we're recording this on the 30th. But when this announcement came through, Constellation Energy's stock jumped 22% in the positive. So people are into it. They're saying,
they've got a customer. It's a built-in customer that's going to pay for all of the power
for a long time.
There's a place for it to go.
Well, shoot.
And Constellation is already a pretty big energy company. They have interest in natural gas, and they know the old jazz. They just want to get this nuclear jalopy up and running.
Well, that's the question, though, Matt. I mean, since you said they shut it down because it wasn't efficient enough for actual contribution to the grid, let's just say, for Constellation's purposes of actually providing energy to its customers, is this a interesting and reasonable use of it? Because it will also take some strain off of the grid from all this AI nonsense.
Well, yeah, think about it. If you could make bespoke nuke plants for all of these companies trying to get their AI stuff off the ground.
There are new small, quote unquote, modular nuke reactors that are starting to be rolled out.
And think about the government's interest. You guys are spinning, you need some stuff to get spun up, hey? Yeah, for your reactor? We can use some of that.
Guys, this is just for our artificial intelligence.
Yeah. Okay.
Just for making those memes, this is literally for meme generation.
It does answer one of the great dilemmas, which is on the horizon, which is how do we power these very thirsty machines, right? And the cleanest answer, obviously, is going to be something like solar power, something like hydroelectric or geothermal power. However, nuclear power is super tasty because all you need is, you need a lot of but it is still cleaner than being dependent upon fossil fuels.
Yes.
That is the great Achilles heel, right? Just like the Achilles heel of so many podcasts is advertising. So if in that terrible example, the idea of powering, we saw this again with things like Bitcoin mining, right?
Exactly.
Also very thirsty, very energy intensive. If you cannot create an easy solar power, hydroelectric, or geothermal source, then nuclear energy is still theoretically way more bang for your buck. And I don't know if everybody is aware of just like the nuts and bolts of nuclear energy. It's making water steam.
That's all it is.
Yes.
And then
It's
turn
crazy.
a turbine.
Yeah.
I feel like people
crazy.
are afraid of the word until they know what it is.
Well, they should be afraid of the word because of the waste. That's this part of the problem, the equation that we haven't solved yet. They just bury it in the desert. Like there's no good way of dealing with nuclear waste.
And if you're still using rods, they can still burn their way right through whatever it is you put below them. It doesn't matter.
Which is what a meltdown literally is, right? It's when it melts down into the damn earth.
I'm so excited about our future episode on how to warn other generations about nuclear waste.
I'm excited about the next party we go to together. We're going to have so much new material, guys.
Nuclear material. So, Ben, when you were talking about how do we feed these thirsty machines, I really thought you were going to say, build a simulation of the year 1999 in New York City. Then build pods for human beings to grow up inside and fill those with some kind of goo. And then make sure all of those humans are batteries connected to your system.
Wait, is this the plot of the movie The Matrix?
Hey, spoilers. Come on. That's Matt's favorite film.
It really is. So it's going to cost $1.6 billion just to get this reactor up and started and working again by 2028.
So they shut it down, but like, does that mean it's fallen into disrepair? They got to like do some refurb to it or
It's
what?
very expensive to maintain. I mean, it's not like this is the equivalent of not just finding a rusted out car that you know could be good. This is the equivalent of finding the rusted out hulk of a car, the chassis of a car, and then saying, yeah, let me look at the engine.
When was it taken offline again, Matt?
2019.
But that's not that long ago. I don't understand this billions situation.
Well, they want a brand new nuclear power generator.
They're going to do it up.
In Unit 1. Okay. Because Unit 2 so bad, Unit 1 has to be real, real good. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah.
But they're not going to build a new reactor. It takes, I mean, we talked about this.
It's still more expensive to build a new reactor.
Yeah. Well,
is the crazy thing.
That's right. We talked about like how long, it's a Southern company here in Georgia has been trying to finish an additional reactor at Plant Vogtle for like 10 years. And it just got finished and so over budget and absolutely a nightmare, just the regulatory process. It's a big deal.
And here's a little stat from that CNBC article, guys, just to keep us going down this track. They're investing all this money, right? The stock for Constellation Energy went way up. Goldman Sachs, you know them.
You know them.
I love that.
You have feelings about them.
I say that in my head every time now. Every time. Thank you for that, Ben.
No, it's good.
Data centers consume an estimated 3% of all U.S. electricity demand this year, as we're recording this. And Goldman Sachs says that number is going to be closer to about 8%, if not exceeding 8% by 2030. And this thing comes online theoretically in 2028. So it could be a huge, huge difference in the strain on the energy grid, as you guys were saying. But here's the biggest thing. CNBC article, I'm going to continue on with you. Let's shout out Spencer Kimball. You're the author of this because I'm reading some of your words verbatim here. In March, Amazon Web Services bought a data center campus from Talon Energy that's going to be powered by the Susquehanna nuclear plant, which is also in Pennsylvania. It's apparently a first-of-its-kind deal. Oracle, another company that's doing this very thing, said it's designing a new data center that's going to be powered by 3 separate small nuclear reactors. And there's another one, guys. The Palisades nuclear reactor in Michigan is going to be returning to service in 2025. And if this one is going to have multiple users, but again, data centers are going to be one of the primary things that it is fueling with that rod technology.
How's hot rods?
This is weird, guys. Cool, weird, scary, awesome.
It's up to future historians, perhaps. And it's definitely up to current nuclear technicians to make sure we don't have another Unit 1.
Yeah.
Ever. Or, God forbid, another Chernobyl.
We've been talking about how paranoid the U.S. government is specifically about Chinese-made vehicle components, software and hardware, right? We were talking about just, there's so much paranoia about the vulnerability of specifically water, electrical, and other utility services. Bringing a bunch of more nuclear rods into the situation just feels, I don't know, it feels scary, but maybe it just feels that way because we've seen some dangerous things happen, and generally humans are at least aware of previous mistakes.
It reminds me of the Concorde jet controversy. Right? Like, remember when?
I remember.
Yeah.
Remembers.
Yes. Yeah. There was once upon a time commercial jet capability. It no longer exists because when this newer technology was rolled out in this manner, it only took one bad thing to sink it. Right? Think about how many commercial planes have a lot of whoopsie daisies right now. Shout out Boeing. And they are embedded in current infrastructure. So the question with nuclear capability is, can you keep things juggling along until you reach a moment when they are normalized, right? What happens how do you reach that threshold? Oh, we love this phrase. How do you reach that inflection point, there we go, where it's weird to have a coal plant and it's normal to have a nuclear plant. The thing is, you can't make a nuclear weapon with coal.
Yeah, it's true. Guys, quick correction. In the case of Palisades, the other nuclear reactor there in Michigan, data centers are not going to be one of the primary things. And I know this because Spencer wrote another article that I just found titled Michigan Nuclear Plant Finalizes Federal Loan to Support First Reactor Restart in U.S. History. And he states here, in the case of Palisades, that's the other reactor, the power is spoken for by Wolverine Power Cooperative, or a co-op, a nonprofit that provides electricity to rural communities in Michigan. So not data centers for now.
Yeah, but that's like when you hear a charity say it gives a portion of the proceeds, like how much of that energy generated out of the pie slices, how much of that is going to rural Michiganders in need?
I mean,
if, great if true. But also, like, it does become the question of, like, how do you feel about nuclear power in general? Because they still haven't licked the waste problem. There's literally a repository outside of Las Vegas called Yucca Mountain. It's just like a bunch of this stuff buried in the desert. I'm not joking. And maybe everybody already knows that, but it's a thing. Like, it doesn't go away, and it's very dangerous.
I would say never lick the waste problem. It's a waste problem. Don't lick it.
Ben earlier said that nuclear energy was tasty. It's not what he meant.
That's what I meant. There are species that are okay. Look, this is a little sci-fi,
but
Simpsons
fish.
It is possible to create, as long as these pesky ethics get out of our way, it is possible to create certain forms of life that could indeed feed off things considered unusable waste. We already see it with extremophiles, right?
Like the glowing ghouls in the Fallout universe.
Just so. Hopefully a smaller life form with fewer hit points.
Wouldn't that be sick, though, if there was some kind, like the way there's certain microbes and things that can, like, eat oil, like in oil spills?
Yes.
Like, if they created or something, like hybridized or whatever, a thing that could actually feed on and digest nuclear waste and then poop it out in some sort of non-nuclear form. I'd
shout out to Silver. This is great. Great stuff.
Seriously.
Too. Yeah. And shout out to A-Frame, shout out to Anonymous, shout out to everybody tuning in tonight. Thank you so much for joining the show. And further, if we could do like our little Uncle Sam thing where you point at this only works for us because we're recording video.
We want you?
Yeah. Triforce, can we get like an Uncle Sam kind of thing? All right, we're all pointing at you on the screen.
We really are.
You specifically.
We held it for an awkward amount of time.
Yeah.
Conspiracy realist. Yeah, we're feeling the vibe. We hope you feel it as well. We can't wait for you to reach out and touch faith. We try to be easy to find online.
That's right. You can find us at the handle Conspiracy Stuff, where we exist all over the internet, including on Facebook, where we have our Facebook group. Here's where it gets crazy as well as on X, FKA Twitter, and on YouTube, where we have video content galore for your enjoyment. On Instagram and TikTok, however, we are Conspiracy Stuff Show.
If you want to call us, we have a number for that. Call 1-833-STDWYTK. When you call in, it's a voicemail system. Give yourself a cool nickname and let us know if we can use your name and message. Just say it somewhere in that message. Then you've got 3 minutes. Say whatever you'd like. If you got more to say than could fit in that message, why not instead send us a good old-fashioned email? We are
the entities that read every piece of correspondence we receive. Be well aware yet unafraid. Sometimes the void writes back. So join us out here in the dark. Conspiracy at iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.